Welcome to the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service and another in the series of our Distinguished Lecturer Public Program Series. I'm Skip Rutherford, Dean of the school. We're honored to have you tonight. We're also honored to welcome back to Arkansas a friend of many in this room who was very instrumental in 1991 and 1992 in a big part of our lives. So we're honored that he's here. To introduce him tonight is one of our students. We're very proud of this young man. He is from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Knows a little bit about politics from that state. But he has great experience in higher education fundraising before coming to the Clinton School. He's got an outstanding record here and is helping me, as you all know, I like to do, raise a little money. He's advising me on how to do that along the way. So would you welcome from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Jason Fisher.
Thank you, good evening. On a sweltering hot day in August 1992, I stood outside in the parking lot of Quaker Oats in my hometown of Cedar Rapids, waiting for the infamous Clinton Gore campaign bus tour to arrive. I'd taken a long lunch from my summer job and walked downtown and got to listen to the new Democratic nominee give a fantastic stump speech. David Wilhelm helped create that moment that remains so vivid in my mind when, as campaign manager for Governor Clinton, he spearheaded that tour bus and returned grassroots politics to the national stage. While not always in the public eye, David's decisions and keen strategies helped vault the Democrats to their first White House win in 16 years. Whether it was crafting strategies like the bus tour or managing the day-to-day operations of campaigns, Mr. Wilhelm's talents helped propel a new generation of political leaders focused on improving the lives of millions of Americans. Mr. Wilhelm grew up in Ohio, receiving his bachelor's degree from Ohio University and a Master of Public Policy from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. He has honorary doctorates from both Ohio University and the College of Charleston. Mr. Wilhelm founded Woodland Venture Management in 1999 with a vision of bringing investment capital to traditionally underserved areas of the country such as Appalachia and the Midwest, providing economic opportunities, business opportunities, and the possibility for real social change, which of course is something that we believe very strongly here at the Clinton School. It's been nearly 15 years now since that bus tour rolled through Cedar Rapids, and I doubt that I could have imagined then that the way that the events transpired and unfolded for me, that I would be speaking here tonight as a student. My fellow classmates and I owe a debt of gratitude to a man who worked very hard to help make this school possible. And I thank him tonight for steering that bus through Cedar Rapids, and I'm honored to introduce him at the Clinton School of Public Service. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to Little Rock, Mr. David Wilhelm.
Thank you very much, Jason. I don't know if you know this, but Jason is from Iowa. I know this because he just did about a 20-minute interview with me. Every question was about Iowa. There's our esteemed dean. I knew the dean of this school before he was an intellectual. But I'm glad to see you have become one. I talked him right. I did, come to think of it. Anyway, it is great to be back. It's 73 degrees out here. It reminds me, I'm on the plane. I see so many friends here. I was on the plane coming down, and I was thinking, I'm going south. It's been 0 degrees for the last 3 weeks in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm headed south. It's 73 degrees, but it reminds me of my first week on the job. You know, when we were at the paint store, right? First week on the job, I was sent to Florida, to Miami, to Dade County to meet with some people. And it was a good meeting and things were going well. And I remember at the end of the meeting, a woman said, "It's just so great that we have a Midwesterner running for President of the United States." And from Florida, I guess this is the Midwest. But I'm from the Midwest. This is not the Midwest. This is warm, and I appreciate it. I remember the paint store, and I want everybody here to know that I am personally responsible for Fleetwood Mac's comeback. Well, I did not choose Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow. Bruce Lindsay, I think, thought of it. It wasn't that well thought through at the time, is my impression. But somebody had prepared an inbox for me. Day one, paint store. First thing that I look at is a letter from the attorneys for Fleetwood Mac saying, "Please cease and desist in the use of the song Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow." I said, "I'm going to make my first executive decision. I am ignoring that letter, and today, look at them." Anyway, thank you for being here. The last time I came to the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, there was a retrospective on the Clinton presidency. And I was given the task of talking about the 1992 campaign in full. They gave me 25 minutes to do so. So this is a little easier tonight. I don't know what you've been told exactly that I'm going to talk about. I saw at one point it was venture philanthropy in the Delta. Are you thinking I'm going to talk about that? I am not going to talk about that. I'm going to come close though. I am not here to talk about philanthropy. And I don't know much about the Delta, but I am going to talk about venture capital in Appalachia, because a lot of my time over the past several years has been devoted to bringing venture capital into the underserved region that I grew up in, which is Central Appalachia, the foothills of the Appalachians in Ohio. That's where I'm from. West Virginia, Kentucky, Western Maryland, kind of think about that area. But there is nothing philanthropy about it. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about organizing for business success in Appalachia, in places like the Delta. I want to talk about making money for investors in places like Appalachia and the Delta. I want to talk about creating jobs that pay well and are sustainable in areas like Appalachia and the Delta. But I want to stress very strongly that no one does a company in the Delta, in Appalachia, or anywhere else a favor by holding them to some yardstick that is less than the true test of the marketplace. There is no reason to believe, in fact, it is arrogance to believe, that we can't create businesses that can compete with the best businesses anywhere in the country. And I include businesses in Silicon Valley in places like Appalachia and the Delta. How do I know this? This is exactly what we are doing in the Central Appalachian region. And I want to talk about that. You're crazy, you might say. How can you really have companies that are going to increase earnings at 30% a year coming out of the Delta or places like Appalachia? Yes. Do we have the kind of management talent that can create those kinds of companies and create that kind of shared and lasting wealth in places like Appalachia and the Delta? You bet. You're crazy to say, I am crazy like a fox. Now, you have to organize for success. Because success follows success, money follows money. But I remember something Governor Clinton said frequently during his campaign, and I've heard him say this a million times, you've probably heard him say it 5 million times. When you see a turtle on a fence post, do you ever hear this one? You know it didn't get there by accident. It took me 2 years to figure that out. You see, somebody has to put the turtle on the fence post. Now, that's the way it is when it comes to venture capital in areas like Appalachia and the Delta. Money is not going to suddenly start flowing into the Delta from Silicon Valley, Boston, New York City, LaSalle Street, Chicago. It's not going to happen in the absence of leadership locally, in the absence of organizing ourselves for that eventuality. You can hope it's going to happen. You can engage in wishful thinking that it might happen, but it is not going to happen. There's absolutely no evidence of it. Good businesses that otherwise would succeed in regions like the Delta and Appalachia do not succeed because the market is imperfect, information is imperfect, people who live and work in LaSalle Street and the Silicon Valley do not know about good businesses in places like Arkansas and Ohio and West Virginia and Indiana. And it's expensive and takes time to get here. You cannot hope and wish that that will occur in the absence of organizing ourselves. So do not hope that that's going to happen. You need to create an infrastructure that allows companies with high growth potential to make the most of their potential to become truly venture ready. You've got to figure out ways to put the turtle on the fence post. Now, the first piece of advice that I want to provide with regard to the possibility of doing the kind of work we're doing in Appalachia and the Delta is the wisdom of the following statement. Nobody wants to go out on a date with somebody who needs a date. Okay? Are you with me on this? There's nothing worse than hearing, will you please go out with this person? She or he needs a date. You are going to go running for the hills. That is not the argument you want to hear. Now, similarly, nobody wants to provide funding to a program that needs money. That is not a compelling argument. And nobody wants to invest in a business because the business needs money. I mean, it may be true, but it's not a very compelling reason to invest in it. It makes you want not to invest in that business. It makes you want not to go on a date. Okay, where am I going with this? Regions can get defensive. Regions sometimes think they need a date. Regions have been down so long that they've forgotten about the assets that they bring to the table that are worthy of investment. I think about the last time that this country really thought and cared about poor people. It was arguably in the early 1960s, a long time ago at this point. Lyndon Johnson was able to build on some of the work of John F. Kennedy, but he got the Great Society through. The Great Society. He didn't talk about that we needed to pass a food stamp program because we need the money. he created a picture of what our society could become if everyone had a stake in it. It was the Great Society. I have gone back and reread his speeches because actually, my hometown of Athens, Ohio is the first place. This is our story and we're sticking with it. Where he is said to have used the term, the Great Society. And the speech sounds so naive to our ears today, but it was idealistic and it was uplifting. And his basic message was, we're all in this together, and together we are going to build a great society. It wasn't about neediness. It was about what we could become together. And that kind of thinking needs to inform entrepreneurs. It needs to inform regions of the country. It needs to inform people who go out and fight for funding for their programs. It's a way of thinking that sometimes when you're from places like Appalachia, perhaps the Delta, we might have forgotten how to think. Let me talk, I think the work that I'm doing in Appalachia is so much a part of Bill Clinton's legacy. In the last year of his presidency, he went around the country promoting what became the New Markets legislation. I remember on July 4th, 2000, he was in Hazard, Kentucky. The most American of days, touting the most American of possible ideas. It was 105 degrees outside. And it was a bizarre day in some ways because it was 105 degrees. A junior high marching band was seated in front of him. They hadn't had anything to drink for 4 or 5 hours. And like dominoes, one after another fainted during his speech. I mean, literally 10 people were pulled out of the crowd on that day. But he said, I come here today to say that I believe the government's part is to create the conditions of a strong economy to give individuals the tools they need to succeed, including education and training, and to give incentives to businesses to take a second look at places that they have overlooked. And then the job of the private sector is to give you a chance to make the most of your God-given ability. That is what we are trying to do. And out of those tours around the country, he went to Hazard, Kentucky, he went to East St. Louis, Illinois, he went to a reservation in Arizona, came the New Markets program. And one element of the New Markets program was very directly relevant to the work that we were doing in Appalachia. It's called the New Markets Venture Capital Company. And here's what that program did. It said, we will match dollar for dollar every dollar you raise in investment capital from the private sector. But here's the key component of the New Markets Venture Capital Company legislation that was passed at the end of Bill Clinton's term in office. They said, you also for us to approve you also need to raise an amount equal to 30% of the capital that you've raised from private sector investors in the form of grant money that will be utilized for operational assistance to high-growth companies in the underserved area that you're working in. Now, Hugh Sherman, who is the new dean of the business school, could tell this story. He's from Ohio University. He's from the very same institution, and in fact, Hugh Sherman put together the operational assistance program that we have become evangelists for in the context of our New Markets Venture Capital work. All right, so here's Bill Clinton's legislation. We're going to match you dollar for dollar for the private sector capital that you raise. We're going to require that you raise 30% of your private capital in the form of grants that will be utilized on behalf of your companies for operational assistance, and we will match that dollar for dollar. So we went out, and we were just two dumb to know better and too stupid to quit. And we went out and somehow we raised $12 million to invest in high-growth companies in Appalachia. You ever want to try to do something hard, try raising $12 million for that. And we also convinced funders, including most notably the state of Ohio, to pull together $4 million for grants for operational assistance. Now, that is a different kind of venture capital fund. At the end of the day, we had about $27 million to be invested directly into companies, and we had $8 million to utilize off budget, if you will, to hire management consultants, to hire executive recruiters, to hire staff at Ohio University, to put together the kind of assistance that businesses know they have access to in places like San Francisco or Chicago, New York City, or Boston, but are pretty hard to come by in Morgantown, West Virginia, Athens, Ohio, Huntington, West Virginia, and so on. So now, what does that operational assistance money do? Well, it allows us to hire consultants. It allows those companies to make the most of their God-given potential. It mitigates risk. And it allows us to be fully competitive with businesses that have high growth potential elsewhere in the United States of America. It is an amazing program. And we have become evangelical about the wisdom of this program. Let me give you an example of, well, let me tell you the day I became a venture capitalist. Reverend Jesse Jackson comes into the region and holds a economic roundtable. None other than Reverend Jesse Jackson. And I didn't know exactly how he would be, what the reaction would be by people locally, but it was interesting. He was embraced. He held this economic roundtable. One person after another stood up and said, you know what, here's what I could do if I had access to capital. I remember one friend saying he picked raspberries. And he stood up and he was shaking, and this was the hardest thing for him ever to do, to stand up and testify in front of Reverend Jackson. He said, there would be no end to the raspberries I could pick if I could only have access to capital to purchase a new raspberry picker. Anyway, Reverend Jackson leaves. There's great excitement in the room that day. And I said to myself, we can't just let this energy dissipate. We can't just let the headlines speak for a day. We need to go out and raise money to make a difference. Now, the reason I felt so strongly about this has everything to do with the region that I grew up in. Southeastern Ohio has been a source of iron that helped build this country, a source of coal that has helped build this country. People have worked as hard as they know how to work, for as long as they know how to work, year after year after year, and have created great wealth in this country. There's an old iron furnace not far from where I grew up, and I remember seeing a picture 50, 60 years say around 1920, 1930, 50, 60 years before when I was 8 years old. And I remember not a single tree for miles and miles and miles could be seen around this iron furnace. I said, where are the trees? Well, every tree had been cut down in order to fuel the furnaces that created the iron that built our country. And then the iron went elsewhere, and the wealth that was created some mansions in Pittsburgh and New York City, but the people of southeastern Ohio, didn't really benefit in a sustained way. Then it was coal's turn, and the history of coal is well known. Again, people worked as hard as they possibly could, and mansions were built in San Francisco and not in Chicago and Pittsburgh and elsewhere. But the wealth that was created by the hard work of the people within that region did not stay in the region. So the question becomes, what do you do about that? Today, the cycle continues through, it just kills me because you have small towns competing as hard as they know how to compete for prisons. And so what do you do to try to change that? What do you do to try to turn that around? And what you do at the end of the day is that you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in the assets that you bring to the table. You have to believe in the talents of the people who live locally. You have to build on the indigenous skills and managerial vision that exists within the region. You cannot hope that somebody is going to swoop down and magically provide money. So that has been that has been what we have done. Adina Ventures, based in Athens, Ohio. Let me tell you something about the companies that are part of our portfolio. One company is called Emergent. It started in West Virginia. Emergent, it creates the platform for multiplayer video gaming, internet-based multiplayer video gaming. Comes out of West Virginia. They are one of the leading purveyors of that technology anywhere in the world. Another company, Vested Health, consumer-directed health insurance plans. One of the leading providers of consumer-directed health insurance plans in that part of the United States of America. Best Transport. They want to be the saber, if you will, for the trucking industry, matching loads to truckers. Mercer, out of Lexington, Kentucky. A bracket buster, if you will, in the industry of video screens. You know, at the Democratic National Convention, you have these huge video screens. They have new technology coming out of Lexington, Kentucky that they fundamentally believe will change that industry. Game Plan, a digital video provider to coaches at the high school, college, and professional level. All these companies either are indigenous to the Central Appalachian region in which we work. There have actually been a few that have come into the region because we have the money to invest in them. It is a big, big deal. So what are the necessary elements of venture strategy that's going to make a difference in places like Appalachia and the Delta? First of all, operational systems. Got to have it. We had it. We have $8 billion to provide to companies outside of our investment capital. That gives these companies the management consulting, the executive recruitment, the services that they need to make the most of their potential. We had it. It made a huge, and is making a huge difference. Economic leadership, deal makers, people who are experienced in private equity and venture capital. When I started out, I'm not a venture capitalist, I'm not a private equity expert, but I was able to recruit people. There are plenty of people that want to live in beautiful regions like southeastern Ohio, and we were able to build that. We engaged every single part of Ohio University. Hugh Sherman, who headed up entrepreneurship at Ohio University, required that every MBA student be linked with a local business and provide consulting assistance to these locally based businesses. a huge deal, and changed the culture of those businesses and changed the culture of the business school. Curricula started to emerge at local community colleges in entrepreneurship and digital video gaming, all because we had started the ball rolling. None of that would have happened without our leadership. All of it happened because we started something absolutely consistent with the vision of President Clinton. So, this is not a strategy designed to yield jobs in the most depressed areas of depressed areas. It's a way to build on the assets that are already there. This strategy is not going to produce new businesses and new jobs in the lowest income areas of low income areas. That it will not do. But it is an opportunity to make great progress in places that already have something going for it. It makes sense. Put money where it's going to make the most difference, where the investment required per job created is least. Last July 4th, I picked up the book that Thomas Paine wrote, Common Sense. And he writes, famous book, I figured July 4th was a good day to read that. He writes on page 1, some writers have so confounded society with government as to leave little or no distinction between them. Whereas they are not only different, but have different origins. Society is produced by our wants and government by our wickedness. The former promotes our happiness positively by uniting our affections, the latter negatively by restraining our vices. The one encourages intercourse, the other creates distinctions. So I think about this a lot. The notion that it's society where, the place where free enterprise takes place, where commerce takes place between willing sellers and willing buyers, that is the spot where happiness gets promoted positively. I'm not sure I totally buy it. I mean, I spent most of my life in politics, and just about every religion under the sun argues that the key to moral behavior lies in other-centeredness. And I gotta believe at some level that we can, as a society, as a community, act together through our government. But there is something to this. See, I never thought I would wind up doing what I am doing right now. Never thought it in a million years. So I've asked myself, why do I wind up where I wound up? I think maybe because it is an area where creativity is rewarded. It is an area where you can think more broadly. You can have some vision. I think about our portfolio of companies and the public value that they are providing. One of our portfolio companies is an egg company that has the only pasteurization process for eggs in the world, adding tremendous value in the area of public health. Another one of our companies is a company that's making a huge difference in the area of spinal injuries. I already mentioned a company that's making a big difference in the provision of consumer-directed health insurance, helping to control costs and to provide working people with the health insurance that they need. Another one of our companies creates great value in providing greater gasoline efficiency for fleets. So the story of good deed doing in what I am doing every day is not limited to the fact that jobs and wealth are being created in underserved regions of the country. The goods and services created by the companies themselves add value. So, I'm not suggesting at a school of public service that everybody ought to run out and become venture capitalists. God, no. I mean, there is plenty wrong in the venture capital world. We are a different kind of venture capitalists. We are people who see a capital gap and run in and believe that the flip side of a capital gap is a market opportunity. And nothing would have happened without the positive work of government. Bill Clinton's New Market Venture Capital Company program, the operational assistance that it provided, a public university that served as our principal strategic partner. 6 to 8 banks are investors in our fund because of the Community Reinvestment Act. The SBA investment in our fund itself, government was crucial to everything that we did. But there are two kinds of people in life, I think. There are people who just want to make money, and that's okay, because we need people who just want to make money. They usually wind up making money for others too, if only by accident. But then there are those of us who come to places like a school for public service that are afflicted by an illness, sometimes a grave illness. And that is the requirement that we have to seek the public good, to do what we can to create public value. This sickness causes us to be unhappy in any pursuit that is limited to financial returns alone. I guess what I have learned since leaving the DNC is that there are many different ways to create public value. You can do it in politics. You can do it through the practice of your faith. In our instance, we're doing it through a very hard-nosed, private sector approach, demanding market rates of return from companies that are in some of the most underserved parts of the United States of America. And that is doing something. That town in Nelsonville, Ohio, that I talked about, the biggest exporter of coal in the country 100 years ago, 90 people are working at a company that distributes textbooks ordered over the internet from a warehouse in that town right now. And our investors are going to make plenty of money along the way. It's exciting. You can do it here. Thank you so much for having me.
We have time for a few questions. If you just want to raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your remarks. As a fellow venture capitalist, I found your remarks very informative. Just to tell you a little bit about what we did, we put together a fund here in Arkansas, and we actually called it the Fund for Arkansas's Future. And it's a very early stage fund, but like your fund, it's for profit. And our first mission is to make money for our investors. But moreover, our investors want to do something good for the state of Arkansas, so that's why we set up this fund. It's smaller in size than your fund, but it turns out that we have more than enough capital to do what we want to do. And that's because one of our challenges is simply deal flow inside the state of Arkansas. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. One of our challenges is, again, that we are not finding what we consider to be a sufficient number of venture-worthy companies inside the state in which we can invest our money. So in your fund, when you look at your deal flow, are you finding them in metropolitan areas within Appalachia, or are you finding them in city versus rural? And also, are you doing anything proactively to try to develop that deal flow? Is there anything that we might be thinking about here that we can actually try to help spur entrepreneurship inside the state?
Well, most of the deals that we see, deal flow hasn't been a huge issue for us. I mean, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's a little less good, but it hasn't been a huge issue for us. Most of it comes from areas that are either near a state capital or near universities. Even the Nelsonville-based company is run by a professor, a former professor at Ohio University. There's nothing wrong with that in my view, because the stories of areas like Appalachian and Delta are more complicated than people generally believe. Just real quickly, I was recently named a Child of Appalachian. I was very happy about this award because Bob Evans, you know Bob Evans Restaurants, he'd gotten it the year before, now I got it this year, and I thought this is the coolest thing. And then I started feeling badly about it because there is nothing poor in my background. You know, how could I be this child of Appalachia, worthy of being a child of Appalachia? I'm the son of a college professor, for crying out loud. But then I thought about it for a second. I thought, it's okay. You know what? College professors live in Appalachia too. And the stories of places like Appalachia are more complicated than people generally give credit. We do a lot to help generate deal flow, and really, I think the whole operational assistance program is designed to do precisely that. There are companies that have, you know, the hope of being high-growth companies. Well, we're able to sort of descend on them. We've got consultants we can hire. We've got students that are working with them. We've got faculty members that are engaged. We have now worked to create angel funds all over the region so that prior to coming to us, they have the opportunity to get angel backing or seed fund investment. They have the ability to obtain operational assistance. They're working with people at the university. And gradually, with the successes that we're having, an entrepreneurial climate emerges. And it takes time to do that. I remember a local community college president coming up to me a couple of years ago and said, you know what, Dave, we're going to have an invention convention. Well, I'll tell you what, 5 years ago, they weren't having invention conventions in southeastern Ohio. They just weren't. And so success begets success, money follows money. I think you got to have the operational assistance. You got to have the angel funds there, microequity, and you need to do everything you can to create that culture, and it doesn't happen overnight. But good luck in everything that you're doing.
Thank you for bringing a very unapologetic message to the School of Public Service. It is the epitome of the idea that the private sector can be a public servant also. My question is a two-part question. First, of the 12 or so parts of your investment portfolio, how do you get the majority of your investment ideas? What's the origin? How do they come to you? The second part is, what structure do you use to make decisions about which you're going to invest in?
Sure. Well, one of the the crazy like a fox statement that I made, we are the dominant, maybe the only venture capital company in that region. So people come to us, they find us, we are known, we are aggressive in our outreach. We do everything we can, both through the media and through the likely referrers of deals, bankers, accountants, law firms, and so on. If there is a deal to be done in Central Appalachia, we're going to know about it. We are going to know about it, and we work hard to get that message out. But it is a huge competitive advantage for us. One of the great goals of venture capitalists are to have proprietary deal flow. Usually when somebody says they have proprietary deal flow, they're lying to you. We would never claim to have proprietary deal flow, but we have something approaching that because of our dominant position within the marketplace. Now, how do we make decisions in this fund? it requires a 2/3 vote of a management committee. There needs to be a champion within our team that brings the deal to the attention of the other partners. We then hold meetings where companies come in and make presentations. Long periods of due diligence are pursued, and then ultimately 2/3 of the group have to agree. Now, in reality, the culture of the fund, it's unanimous. If somebody really stood up and said, I don't think we should do that deal, that would be undoubtedly agreed to take yes.
David, really pleased to have you back. I've got 2 questions. One short, did the raspberry grower ever get his picking machine? And 2, just a nuts and bolts question. Venture capital, obviously, talking about profit from the venture side. You usually do it in terms of loans or as part of the business you take a percentage?
We take a percentage. The reason high growth companies sometimes prefer venture capital to loans is because we are taking an ownership position and they do not need to pay out a current income repayment, a loan repayment. So high growth companies like venture capital as a result. The raspberry picker, it just shows how naive I was about the whole business. So, you know, I went out thinking I'm going to help that raspberry picker. Well, we don't help raspberry pickers. We really don't. I mean, there need to be other programs for raspberry pickers. There needs to be micro lending. There needs to be. I'm never going to win the Nobel Peace Prize due to the work that we do. We are looking for businesses that have that we believe when we make the investment, they're going to have annual rates of growth of 30 to 50%. That is a rare business. And it's the kind of business that when we went out there and tried to raise money for the people, there are no businesses in Appalachian, Ohio, and West Virginia that can generate those kinds of returns. Well, wrong. Wrong. I think just about any venture capitalist anywhere in this country would be proud to have the portfolio that we have right now. And one of the things that we had to do in Bill Clinton's New Market Venture Capital Company legislation is that we have to put 80% of our money into businesses that are located in low-income census tracts. So I like to call it our little miracle, that we're doing this work. 80% of our money is going into low-income census tracts. We've created over 700 to 800 jobs. If we announced one day that a plant was coming into southeastern Ohio with 700 to 800 jobs, they would put a statue up in my honor, but we've done it one business at a time. It's really, really a good story. But the raspberry picker isn't going to generate 30 to 50% rates of return. And we're not an elixir. We don't wave a magic wand. But we're going to have 10 to 12 companies in our portfolio. Some of them are going to be immensely successful. And we have changed, I think, in a fundamental way, the culture of the region in support of entrepreneurial efforts. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's happening. Yes, sir.
I'm curious about your comment about yield, and I can't recall what you said about grants. How much did incentives programs that were developed for the region enable you to get the yield you wanted? And would you have been, or how much of a discount off of that yield would you have had if you had these grants or incentive programs or other things that would kick the yield up?
That's a great question. The question is really what kind of rate of return would you expect on these investments in the absence of the support that we receive? Here's what we got as a result of the legislation. We got dollar for dollar match on the investment capital. and we got dollar match on the operational assistance. Clearly, the operational assistance both mitigated risk and helped the companies we ultimately invested in grow faster and stronger than they otherwise would have. The fact that we got the dollar-for-dollar match in investment capital meant that the fund was larger, the management fees larger as a result. The kind of team that I could recruit became deeper and more professional as a result. I don't think there's any way of knowing exactly what the answer to your question is. Clearly, it helps the businesses in a portfolio like ours become competitive with any others anywhere in the country. And as a result, for every dollar we've invested, we've been able to attract $3 or $4 in additional private capital from the Silicon Valleys, from the LaSalle Streets, from the New Englands of the world. So, great question. I think at a certain level impossible to answer. In the absence of the program, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. We would have had a fund that would have been stuck at around $9 million, no operational assistance, limited management team. We would have been in bad shape. So in some ways it made it possible. And that may be the better way of looking at it. Yes? In the back? Yeah.
80% has to be low income. Is this indigenous?
Are the businesses indigenous?
I have several questions.
Yeah.
Low income, 80%. Are those indigenous businesses? How do you get your money out? And are you required to keep it in for some period of time? And what would you say about the educational level in these areas that make these successful or not?
Yeah. We typically, it would be possible under certain circumstances to flip the company right away. That's not what we tend to do. That opportunity hasn't presented itself. So we told our investors that we generally would keep our money in a company from 3 to 5 years, and that's pretty much what we're doing. Our companies right now are just now ready to have some form of an exit. I think in the vast majority of instances, our exits will be some form of acquisition. I don't suspect we're going to have a lot of IPOs out of the region. It's possible. I think the multiplayer video gaming company is a potential IPO candidate. Maybe a couple others are as well. But the most likely exit is an acquisition. The most likely period of time that we hold in companies is 3 to 5 years. It's illiquid capital for investors. Education level? I don't know. The education level of the managers is high, of the entrepreneurs is high. I mean, for the most part, we're dealing with people that have, advanced degrees or coming out of universities. As I said, the story of these regions is more complicated. They are many of the entrepreneurs, the founders, are serial entrepreneurs. The EdMap company in Nelsonville, Ohio, that distributes college textbooks ordered over the internet, that guy's done it before, done it successfully. Happened to be a professor at Ohio University. So the education level of the workers, I don't know. It's you don't need to be a college graduate to be one of the 90 employees at EdMap in Nelsonville, Ohio, and I'm kind of glad that we're providing jobs for people that don't have college degrees. But what they do have are decent paying jobs, well above the marketplace generally, and certainly in us, investors, while we will never say, don't move, if it's in the ultimate interest of the company to move, we are going to fight that. We are going to require that that case be made. If that company gets acquired at the end of the day, we're going to do everything we can to keep those jobs and that company in the Appalachian, Ohio region. That is our mission. That's what we're all about, in addition to making money for our investors. So, high probability of a continued job at a higher than average level of pay. And in that instance, you know, it's distribution of textbooks, not the highest level of education required. And that's a great benefit for the people of Nelsonville.
We have time for one more question.
It's a great model. Thank you for sharing it with us. I have a question. This is really about the Delta, and we have a new Delta Regional Authority here. And did you get any assistance from the Appalachian Regional Authority in any way? And could our Delta Regional Authority embrace this model as a way to really bring this area of the country back with the rest?
We worked closely with, I mean, there wasn't much they could do for us directly, I don't think. I'm trying to think of the planning grants. We did get planning grants from the ARC. It's not like the ARC could give us, you know, millions of dollars in capital or operational assistance money, but they did provide us, he was right, with planning grants that, you know, at the very early stage made a difference in getting us off the ground. So the ARC was helpful. The chairman of the ARC, Jesse White, was intimately familiar with what we were doing and was a cheerleader every step of the way. The Republican administration in Ohio, then led by Governor Taft, was very supportive of our work. So it certainly was the kind of project that created bipartisan political support. In some ways, there were limits as to what existing programs could do, which was the beauty of the New Markets Venture Capital Company program that has now been eliminated under the Bush administration. But for us, at that moment, was just absolutely critical to building a fund of sufficient size that we could have true management depth and that we would have a large enough pot of money to provide genuine operational assistance to companies in that part of the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may not have won the Nobel Peace Prize, but after surviving the 1992 political campaign and winning, he wins the Profile of Courage Award. Friends of David want to visit with him. We have a reception following, so take your time. Y'all come say hello, and we're just honored that David Wilhelm is back in Little Rock and back in Arkansas. Thank you all for coming.